Before you bought the bag, before you stacked the cans, before you watched every survival video this algorithm threw at you, your zip code already made a decision about you, not your gear, not your skills, your address. Today we're going to score it. 8 factors, each one worth 1 to 10 points, maximum 80. By the end of this video, you'll have a number, and that number is going to tell you something your realtor never did. Pull out a paper, write your zip code at the top. We're doing this together. Rule: preparation is a matter of strategy, and strategy always begins with a map. Methodology: 8 factors. FEMA hazard data, USDA agricultural maps, Census Bureau population density, FBI crime trajectory, EPA water databases. All public, all free, all data most Americans have never looked at together in the same place. Higher score is better. A 10 on nuclear proximity means you're nowhere near a target. A 1 means you are the target. Simple math. Uncomfortable results. Let's go. Factor 1. Nuclear target proximity. How many miles away are you? Score: 1 to 10. Write down your first number. FEMA doesn't publish the full priority strike list. They won't. But between declassified Cold War targeting doctrine, open source military analysis, and basic strategic logic, the map reconstructs itself. First strike priorities in any serious nuclear exchange. Counterforce targets. The United States Air Force maintains approximately 400 active Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missiles distributed across silo fields in Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota. Every single one is a target, not because of what's nearby. Those states are largely empty, but because eliminating launch capability before it can be used is doctrine priority 1. You live in rural Montana and think distance protects you. The threat is underground, 5 miles from your nearest gas station. Second tier. Command infrastructure. Strategic Command at Offutt Air Force Base, Omaha. NORAD and Space Force clustering around Colorado Springs. Naval Station Norfolk, the largest naval installation on the planet. Joint Base Lewis McChord anchoring Pacific Command in Washington State. Third tier. Major population centers as psychological and economic targets. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Not because they're fortified, because eliminating them destroys the capacity and will to rebuild. Here's what people consistently get wrong. The kill radius of a modern warhead is roughly 5 miles. That sounds survivable at 20 miles out. It isn't. The overpressure wave extends further. The thermal pulse extends further still. Initial radiation zone, 50 miles. Fallout corridor, depending on upper-level winds at the time of detonation, up to 300 miles downwind. "I'm not in the city" is not the protection you think it is. The real question is whether you're sitting in the fallout corridor, and that answer changes entirely based on which direction the wind is blowing. Score yourself within 50 miles of any target described, 2 or 3, 50 to 100 miles, 4 or 5, 100 to 150 miles, 7, more than 150 miles from any significant target, not in a prevailing downwind corridor, 9. Write down your first number. That score only matters if you survive long enough for location to become relevant. And the thing that kills people faster than radiation in almost every documented collapse scenario has nothing to do with weapons. It has to do with what comes out of your tap, or stops coming out of your tap. Factor 2. Fresh water access. Is there any within walking distance? Score: 1 to 10. Write down your second number. The Colorado River Basin is at storage levels water engineers describe as historically unprecedented. 40 million people across 7 states depend on that river. Las Vegas draws approximately 90% of its municipal water from Lake Mead. Phoenix takes around 36% from the Colorado system. The engineering community has no credible restoration plan on the table at current consumption rates. But the Colorado situation is the slow version of this problem. The fast version hits everywhere. In any serious grid-down scenario, municipal water treatment plants fail within 72 hours of losing power. Pumps stop, pressure drops. Whatever remains in the distribution pipes becomes a bacterial growth medium. Your tap is either dry or actively dangerous, possibly both. When that happens, the question for your zip code is not whether water exists somewhere nearby. The question is, can you walk to it, filter it, and carry it back? Not drive, walk. Because in week 2 of any serious collapse, fuel becomes its own separate emergency. The Aral Sea was once the 4th largest lake in the world. Soviet irrigation projects in the 1960s began diverting the rivers that fed it. By the 1990s, it had lost 90% of its volume. Entire fishing fleets sat rusting in harbors that were now desert. The cities built on that water infrastructure had no alternative. That's not a Soviet-era curiosity. That's Phoenix and Las Vegas on a slower timeline and with better air conditioning. Score yourself. Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas, California, east of the Sierras, 2. Great Lakes region, 9. Pacific Northwest, west of the Cascades, 8. Appalachian region with direct stream access, 7 or 8. Mississippi watershed within walking distance of a tributary, 7. Great Plains, groundwater dependent only, 4 or 5. If your only water source lives inside municipal pipes with no natural surface water within 5 miles on foot, you are a 2, regardless of which state you're in. Write down your second number. Even if you solve the water problem, the number of people competing for that same source becomes your immediate security concern. Which brings us to the factor most survival content oversimplifies or refuses to discuss honestly. Factor 3, population density. Is the crowd around you an asset or a threat? Score, 1 to 10. Write down your third number. New York City has 27,000 people per square mile. Wyoming has 6. This is not a political statement. This is math about what happens when supply chains stop and people get hungry. The transition from civil behavior to active resource competition doesn't take weeks in dense environments. It takes hours. Dense urban areas carry roughly 3 days of food inventory in stores at any given moment. Just-in-time delivery doesn't stockpile. When delivery stops and thousands of people respond to the same information simultaneously, the result is predictable. Too many people chasing the same finite supply at the same moment. No villains required, just arithmetic. When Prussian forces besieged Paris in 1870, a city of roughly 2 million people discovered in real time what supply chain dependency looks like. The commercial food distribution system, always built on external resupply, exhausted itself within weeks. By November, Parisians were eating horses. By December, zoo animals. By January, rats were selling in open markets at beef prices. This was not an impoverished city. It was one of the most sophisticated in the world. Density and supply chain dependency were the killers. Rural isolation carries its own failure modes. No medical infrastructure, limited skill diversity, no mutual aid capacity when individual needs exceed individual resources. The data consistently points to a sweet spot. Small towns between 2,000 and 15,000 people. Dense enough for community resilience. Sparse enough to avoid mob dynamics. Score yourself. Look up your county population density, not your city. Under 50 per square mile, 8 or 9. 50 to 500, 6 or 7. 500 to 5,000, 3 or 4. Above 5,000, 1 or 2. Write down your third number. Population density tells you about the threat environment. It doesn't tell you whether there's anything to eat once the trucks stop. The answer to that question is more brutal than most people living in American cities have ever been required to consider. Factor 4, agricultural capacity within 50 miles. What remains when the trucks stop? Score, 1 to 10. Write down your fourth number. The average American meal travels 1,500 miles before it reaches your plate. That supply chain has exactly one major failure point. The trucks stop. In any grid-down, fuel-scarce scenario, they stop within 3 to 5 days. After that, the only food available is what's already in your home, what remains on local shelves, and what can be grown within reach without motorized transport. The USDA publishes prime farmland classifications for every county in the country. Public data. Most Americans have never looked at it. It's about to become the most important map they've ever seen. In 1941, German forces cut Leningrad off from supply routes. A city of nearly 3 million people had built itself on the assumption all modern cities share. Food comes from somewhere else. The land immediately surrounding it was marshes and thin soils with no meaningful agricultural capacity. The siege lasted 872 days. The outcome was shaped not by the military balance, but by the geography that existed before a single shot was fired. Las Vegas is encircled by roughly 100 miles of Nevada hardpan, with essentially zero sustainable agricultural capacity. Miami sits on porous limestone with poor soil retention. Phoenix is ringed by caliche. These cities were not built where they were because the surrounding land was productive. They were built for other reasons, and the food supply has always been an assumption, not a geographic reality. The corridor from Ohio through Nebraska is the opposite case. Some of the deepest, most biologically productive topsoil in human civilization. That concentration is not an economic accident. It is the reason settlement organized there in the first place. Score yourself. USDA Web Soil Survey, 50-mile radius. Prime agricultural land actively farmed within reach, 8 or 9. Mixed suburban farmland with reduced but existing production, 5 to 7. Urban or industrial with no meaningful capacity nearby, 2 or 3. Desert, high altitude, or Arctic adjacent, 1. Write down your fourth number. Knowing where the food is answers half the question. Understanding the security environment between you and that food is the other half. Which brings us to the most double-edged factor on this list. Factor 5. Military installation, proximity, threat or opportunity. Score, modified. Write down your fifth number. Most survival content discusses military bases in exactly one direction. Targets, stay away. That's half the analysis. The threat side is real. Naval Station Norfolk is the world's largest naval installation and a first-strike target. No serious analyst disputes this. Offutt Air Force Base hosts Strategic Command, which controls nuclear forces. Colorado Springs places NORAD, Space Force Command, and Peterson Space Force Base within 20 miles of each other. Within 30 miles of any installation on that list. Subtract 3 from a base of 5. 30 to 80 miles. Subtract 1. Now the direction most channels won't go. Military bases are the largest prepositioned stockpiles of food, fuel, medical equipment, and engineering assets in their entire region, by design and doctrine. In any extended collapse that doesn't involve a direct nuclear exchange, those stockpiles become the most significant material resource concentration within hundreds of miles. Whoever controls existing supply concentrations shapes the recovery timeline. That is the consistent historical pattern. National Guard depots are different from major bases. Smaller, not high-value nuclear targets, present in virtually every state, stocked specifically for regional emergency response, water purification, generators, medical supplies, food. Guard personnel have families in local communities, which creates a meaningfully different incentive structure during extended disruption. Within 50 to 100 miles of a Guard depot that is not itself a major target, add 2 points. A depot with documented active disaster response history, add 3. Start at 5. Apply the modifiers. Write down your fifth number. Geography covers half the survival equation. The social environment is the other half, and it's already transmitting data about its own stability right now, before any collapse arrives. Most people don't know how to read it. Factor 6. Crime rate trajectory. The trend matters more than the number score. 1 to 10. Write down your sixth number. We are not scoring current crime rates. We are scoring trajectory, direction and velocity of change over the last 3 years. Here's why that distinction matters more than the number itself. A city with high crime trending consistently downward has something that cannot be purchased with gear. Functioning institutional mechanisms, law enforcement with operational legitimacy, community investment, social stabilization systems that work. Those same mechanisms determine whether a community can self-organize when external systems fail. The capacity for order, even imperfect order, is a survival asset almost no prepper discussion accounts for. A city with moderate crime trending sharply upward is a different situation. The social contract is already fraying under normal conditions. Remove the economic floor, sever the supply chain, strip away the institutional authority law enforcement requires to function. You are not beginning a collapse process. You are accelerating one already in motion. The Byzantine Empire in its final century offers a useful frame. Constantinople remained physically defensible for decades before 1453. What had hollowed out was institutional coherence, tax systems that no longer functioned, military units with fractured loyalty, civil administration that had been losing capacity for a generation. The walls held. The institutions didn't. The trajectory was the real story, not the final data point. The FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Database is public. Look up your metropolitan statistical area, not your neighborhood, your MSA, 3-year violent crime trend. Direction, not absolute level. One additional signal. UCR data doesn't capture insurance market withdrawal. When major carriers begin refusing to write new policies in a region, as has been happening across parts of the Gulf Coast, California, and Florida in recent years, they are making an explicit actuarial statement that the risk profile has crossed a threshold where the math no longer works. Insurers don't make political statements. They make probability calculations with real financial stakes. When that calculation says a location is uninsurable, that is a different category of warning than crime statistics. Declining trend, 7. Stable, 5. Rising over 3 years, 3. Already elevated and rising, 1 or 2. Write down your sixth number. Everything we've covered assumes the physical environment cooperates. For a surprising number of American zip codes, it won't, and the residents have simply normalized the background risk because the worst event hasn't arrived yet. Factor 7. Natural disaster overlap. How many risks are stacked at once? Score 1 to 10. Write down your 7th number. FEMA's National Risk Index scores every county in the United States across 18 distinct natural hazard categories. Public, free, searchable by county. Most Americans have never looked at it. Some of them score high risk on 3 or more categories simultaneously and don't know it because the worst events on each list haven't occurred within their lifetime. Individual disasters are survivable. Communities recover from single catastrophic events. The historical record supports this. The failure mode that actually destroys resilience is overlapping hazards arriving simultaneously when normal recovery infrastructure is already under stress from another direction. The 1908 Messina earthquake struck Sicily during a period of significant regional economic and institutional fragility. The quake killed somewhere between 75,000 and 80,000 people, a number amplified by the near-total collapse of emergency response capacity that had already been deteriorating before the event. The earthquake was geological. The death toll was systemic. Miami-Dade sits in the direct Atlantic hurricane corridor on a porous limestone aquifer experiencing accelerating saltwater intrusion, with documented long-term inundation risk to existing infrastructure. 3 simultaneous, overlapping hazard vectors, not one. The Pacific Northwest carries the Cascadia subduction zone, geologically overdue for a magnitude 9 or above, last full rupture in 1700. Plus intensifying wildfire seasons, plus volcanic activity from the Cascade Range. California adds drought and landslide to earthquake and fire, all on the same certificate of occupancy. Central Tennessee has occasional flooding risk. That is approximately the complete list. Score yourself. FEMA NRI, look up your county. High risk on 3 or more categories, 3. 2 categories at high risk, 5. 1 moderate category, 7. Green across major categories, 9. Write down your 7th number. 1 factor left. This one ties everything together. Because strong scores on the previous 7 mean nothing if the architecture of your daily life has already engineered your vulnerability without your awareness. Factor 8. Critical infrastructure dependency. How many cords are plugged into you? Score 1 to 10. Write down your 8th number. Efficiency and redundancy are not compatible goals in a cost-optimized system. American infrastructure has been optimized aggressively for efficiency for the better part of a century. That means redundancy has been systematically removed. Every backup system that sits idle is a cost center, so it gets eliminated, until it isn't. The winter of 1944 to 1945 in occupied Western Netherlands produced what historians call the Hunger Winter, the Dutch Hunger Winter. Nazi authorities cut food supply routes to the region in response to a Dutch railway strike supporting the Allied advance. What followed was not a story of military bombardment. It was a story of infrastructure dependency. The Netherlands was one of the most developed, urbanized regions in Europe. Its cities had run on centralized food distribution for decades. When those networks were severed, there was no alternative, no institutional memory of local food production, no independent supply chain. Approximately 22,000 people died of starvation in one of the wealthiest corners of the developed world, not because food didn't exist somewhere, but because the distribution architecture had eliminated every independent alternative over generations of efficiency optimization. That is what infrastructure dependency looks like when it fails. For your zip code, how many critical systems does your home rely on that it cannot independently supply? Electrical grid. Can you generate meaningful power independently? Solar with battery storage, generator with fuel reserves, municipal water. Do you have a private well or rain collection capacity, or is every drop grid dependent? Heating, independent heat source that functions without grid power. Communications, any capacity to operate without cellular towers. Count your dependencies. Most suburban American households have all 4, not because those households are negligent, because the architecture of modern suburban life optimizes convenience through centralized dependency. Every efficiency gain trades away a degree of independence. That is the bargain American infrastructure has been making on your behalf, without asking, for your entire life. 2 or more independent systems in place, 6 or 7, 3 or more working redundancies, 8 or 9. Entirely grid-dependent across all 4 systems with no backup, 2. Write down your 8th number. Interactive score section. Add up your number, add up your 8 numbers. Maximum possible, 80, 65 to 80. The quiet ones. Naturally and structurally well-positioned. Your skills and preparation choices are what separate surviving from thriving. Your location is an asset. Don't waste it. 48 to 64. Fighting chance. Real advantages, real gaps. You now know specifically which vulnerabilities you're working against. That is actionable. Preparation strategy matters more here than gear accumulation. 32 to 47. The vulnerable middle, multiple serious structural weaknesses. This is not a gear problem, but it is a root problem. Your strategy needs to address location vulnerabilities directly, not paper over them with supplies that depend on the same compromised infrastructure. 16 to 31. Structural problems. Location disadvantages are deep and overlapping. Relocation deserves serious consideration as a preparation investment, potentially a higher value one than anything else you could spend money on. 8 to 15. The unlucky zip. Multiple critical factors at the bottom tier simultaneously. Your preparation priority is an exit strategy, not a gear list. Drop your score in the comments, just the number. My hypothesis, 70% of this audience scores below 45. Most of you are in the vulnerable middle or below, not because you're unprepared, but because American population density has organized itself around economic opportunity in precisely the locations that score worst on these factors. Prove me wrong. Top 5 Best Survival Profiles. Number 1. Bozeman, Montana/Gallatin County, over 140 miles from the nearest significant nuclear target. The Gallatin River watershed provides high-quality filterable surface water within walking distance of virtually any residential area in the county. Population density sits at 36 people per square mile. Adjacent to Montana's grain belt. Well water common. Solar exposure excellent. Malmstrom Air Force Base and its associated silo fields sit approximately 150 miles north. Far enough to exclude direct blast effects. Close enough that fallout corridor analysis deserves attention on the eastern side. A manageable variable, not a disqualifier. If you've noticed Bozeman property values climbing steadily for a decade, you're watching smart money arrive at this conclusion independently. Estimated score, 62 to 67. Number 2. Asheville, North Carolina/Henderson County. The Blue Ridge Mountain topography provides natural barriers that matter across multiple collapse scenarios. Fallout dispersion, population movement from coastal metros, and physical isolation from high-density zones. The French Broad River runs through the region. The area sits inside the hurricane belt geographically, but outside the direct impact corridor for most significant Atlantic storms. Mountains dissipate energy before systems reach this far inland. Agricultural tradition in the Appalachian foothills is deep and actively practiced, not historical. Community cohesion in Western North Carolina has demonstrated the kind of mutual aid capacity that scales when institutions fail. Estimated score, 58 to 64. Number 3. Knoxville, Tennessee/Knox County. Direct Tennessee River access in a watershed managed by the Tennessee Valley Authority, one of the most robust surface water systems in the eastern United States. Well outside the nuclear target priority list. Appalachian farmland within reach with an active agricultural community. Population density sits in the operational sweet spot, large enough for genuine skill diversity, not so large that resource competition becomes structural. Estimated score, 55 to 62. Number 4. Spokane, Washington/Spokane County. The Spokane River, combined with one of the largest basalt aquifer systems in North America, gives this region water security that is unusual at this scale. The Palouse Wheat Country, among the most productive dryland wheat farming land in the world, begins 50 miles to the south. Population density is moderate. The political culture of eastern Washington is significantly more oriented toward self-sufficiency and land-based skills than the western side of the Cascades. Fairchild Air Force Base introduces genuine target complexity, but also represents a significant regional guard asset presence. Estimated score, 54 to 60. Number 5. Columbia, Missouri/Boone County. Sitting in the geographic center of American agricultural capacity, with the Missouri River Basin nearby and some of the most consistently productive farmland in the country surrounding it. Columbia's mid-size university city character matters not for prestige reasons, but because it represents an unusual concentration of technical, medical, agricultural, and engineering skills in a relatively small footprint. No significant nuclear targets in the region. Crime trajectory stable. Estimated score, 53 to 59. Bottom 5. Worst survival profiles. Number 1. Miami-Dade County, Florida direct Atlantic hurricane corridor, with Category 4 and above exposure on a 15 to 20-year statistical cycle. The Biscayne Aquifer is experiencing accelerating saltwater intrusion. Limestone substrate provides no meaningful agricultural capacity. High density. Zero significant food production within 50 miles in any direction. Significant portions of Miami-Dade's existing infrastructure are on a documented inundation timeline on a 20-year horizon. This is an active engineering planning problem for the county, not a theoretical concern. Estimated score: 18 to 24. Number 2, Las Vegas, Nevada/Clark County. Approximately 90% of municipal water from Lake Mead at historically low storage levels with no credible restoration plan under current consumption. Zero agricultural capacity within 100 miles. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Without grid-powered cooling, that is a direct lethal threat within hours, not days. Las Vegas is extraordinary proof that you can build a functioning city in a location that cannot support one. It's also proof that the debt accumulates invisibly until it doesn't. Estimated score: 15 to 22. Number 3, Phoenix, Arizona/Maricopa County, Colorado River dependent, in a river system under severe long-term stress. Groundwater depletion rates have been exceeding recharge rates in the Phoenix Basin for decades. Historic heat records broken repeatedly in recent years, with a worsening trajectory. Zero local agricultural capacity. High density. Fully municipal infrastructure dependent at every level with minimal regional redundancy. The combination of water scarcity and heat dependency creates a vulnerability profile that individual preparation alone cannot meaningfully offset. Estimated score: 16 to 23. Number 4, Norfolk, Virginia/Hampton Roads. Naval Station Norfolk is the largest naval installation on the planet and, without serious dispute in any open-source strategic analysis, a first-strike target in any nuclear exchange scenario. 30 miles from that installation is not meaningful distance when targeting decisions are made. The entire Hampton Roads region sits within the threat radius regardless of specific municipality. Hampton Roads is simultaneously among the fastest sinking coastlines in the continental United States, sea level rise compounding localized land subsidence, creating two structural problems, neither of which has a clear mitigation path. Estimated score: 12 to 18. Number 5, New York City/inner boroughs, 27,000 people per square mile in Manhattan. Zero agricultural capacity within the 5 boroughs or realistic immediate surroundings. A potential nuclear priority target on both psychological and economic grounds. Full infrastructure dependency across all 4 critical systems with no independent alternatives available at any realistic residential scale. The Catskill and Delaware watershed reservoir system is genuinely excellent water infrastructure. The distribution system that moves it into city buildings is entirely grid-dependent. The water exists. Getting it to 8 million people without functioning pumps is a different problem entirely. Estimated score: 14 to 20. Closing your zip code isn't a life sentence, it's a starting point. What you have now that you didn't have 30 minutes ago is specific. Which factors are working against you? By number, by address. That changes where the next $500 goes. If you scored below 40 and want a structured framework for closing your specific gaps, every factor in this video, with operational protocols by location profile, the link is in the description. Drop your score in the comments. Just the number. Let's build the map.